Avid Knits podcast. My name is Sarah, and you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry, both as Avid Knits. Today is Friday, June something or other, 11th, I think. It is hot in Houston. It is 89 degrees, and my husband and my brother-in-law have decided that they are going to go biking. Normally when they go biking, they hit a trail. They do mountain biking or trail riding or something. And for some reason, they let a coworker con them into doing like a 35-mile ride. I don't know where they're going, but apparently they're going to do 35 miles. I don't know if that's 35 miles there and then 35 back, or if it's like split in half, there and back. What I do know is it's 1,000 degrees outside. Whatever. So my ringer is on, so if you hear any notifications come through, that is on simply because whenever they need me, because this isn't an if, it's a quite probable when they decide that they're sick of it, I'm sure they will call, and I will get in my brother-in-law's truck, and I will go retrieve them. So I don't have a whole lot of content, I'm not going to lie to you. I've been pretty monogamous this last week. Been pretty busy this last week. A lot of school. Lots of education, not only on my end, but educating my kid. So that's led to some really long, kind of difficult conversations. I'm gonna knit while I chat with you. Some really long, kind of difficult conversations, not because they're difficult to explain. It is difficult to explain. Not because the concept is hard to understand, but because children don't carry the same shame. Conversations with your kid about racism aren't hard. They're not hard for the expected reasons, they're not hard because they don't understand the concept. They get the concept of what it's like to be treated differently because of, something you can't control. Kids are notoriously terrible to each other, and usually it's an adult that's saying, hey, you can't say that, that's not nice, and then having to explain to them why what they said was crappy. Or like my niece and I have been having a really big conversation lately about bullying, why it is that what you said wasn't nice, and why you're putting people down, and how it's affecting the way people look at you and how they want to spend time with you. The hard part for me about talking to my son about racism is, one, I'm a grown-up and I understand it, so there's a lot of shame around it. You don't want to talk to your kids about these things. And the reason you don't want to talk to your kids about these things is because they will inevitably ask, why are things like that? If you know it's wrong, why aren't you fixing it? Because that's what you teach your kids, right? What you're doing is wrong, stop doing it. Or, you really hurt that person, I'm sorry is not enough. You have to also have a plan of how you're going to not hurt them in the future and what you're going to do to change the behavior. At least that's what I've taught my son. There's multiple steps to an apology. It's not, I'm sorry. That's the first step. The first step is, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. My actions hurt you because I did this, and this is how it made you feel. I will change how I do that, and here's how I'm going to do it. So, or, I will change, is there anything I can do to help make it better right now? And then step 5 is to understand that nobody owes you an acceptance. Nobody has to accept your apology. So there might be a time where nobody does, and you're going to have to sit with that discomfort of what it's like to not be forgiven, I guess, which I think is where we are as a country right now. You can apologize to Black people and the indigenous people and people of color for the centuries of racism and hatred that this country has been built upon. Nobody's going to accept your apology, and I think that that's one of the things that we as white people have the hardest time understanding, is that just because we said we were sorry doesn't matter. Just because you're sorry, you didn't do it, oh, it was your grandparents, it doesn't matter. What are you going to do to fix it? And realize that your generation, my son's generation will probably all live and die without having any semblance of forgiveness or an acceptance of an apology. Black people in this world might acknowledge your apology and might acknowledge that you're starting to maybe sort of take it seriously, But until the entire thing comes down and there's a couple of generations removed from the pain, nobody's going to look at this with anything other than absolute horror. Like, you can't, I'm sorry, your way out of this, you know? And I think that's just really, really hard. Not only to live with, but also to, you know, to, like I said, to explain, you know. And people of color and indigenous people and black people are dealing with the same thing. They're having to tell their children that no matter what you do, some people just aren't going to like you. And even the people that do like you, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get them to like you. Thank you. And that's a terrible thing to teach your kid, you know, that nothing that they do is ever going to be good enough in certain people's eyes, and that there's a very good chance that those certain people are going to end up being their bosses, will end up being their peers, will end up being their professors, will end up being in positions of power above them, and their career success might depend on this person wanting them to advance in some cases, you know. Or that, you know, if you're a black woman in STEM, in science or technology, engineering, math, something like that, you're going to be triple questioned. Not only because you must be hysterical because you are by definition female or present as female or identify as female, and that just in and of itself means that you don't have enough cognitive power to succeed in this branch of, you know, science. You know, but you're a woman, so, you know, you're overly emotional. You're black, so, you know, that's not as good as being white, and you can't possibly be as intelligent. And then, honestly, scientists are just dicks to each other sometimes, you know? So, it's from so many different places. So, even if you're a white person, if you're a white male, a white cisgendered, male-presenting, I don't know, full-blooded American male, whatever, you know, then, I mean, you are the height of privilege. The height of privilege. But being the height of privilege also means that you should be the ones working the hardest to dismantle the system, because none of us are going to be able to do it, you know? Being a parent these days is probably no harder than being a parent at any other given point in history, I'm sure, but it sure does feel like I'm hitting, in an effort to be open and honest with my child, so that he can then walk through life openly and honestly and with compassion. I feel like I'm tackling things that were either spoken to me when I was like near college area, or weren't spoken to me at all, and I had to infer them from my surroundings or learn them on my own. So, to any and all educators of any kind out there, whether your students be little, or your offspring, or somebody else's spawn, or indeed your full-grown relative, cheers. And I would cheers you with a beer, but like I said, I might have to go get these guys. I might have to go get the heat stroke victims, so I don't want to drink. Anyway, so I have tea that's still a little bit hot, so I'm going to hang off. Before I started podcasting, I didn't get to finish it because I thought I meant to podcast yesterday. And somehow yesterday I simultaneously decided that I needed to run out to a yarn store to drop off a sample, visit with a friend because she dropped off some stuff for me, and podcast. And I knew I wanted to do all of this on Thursday, and I knew I wanted to do all of these things on a Thursday afternoon, but for some reason it didn't occur to me that all three of those things could not be done simultaneously. I guess I could have podcasted in the truck, right? Made my husband drive, gone out to the yarn store, put my friend in the back seat, and just podcasted from there. I guess I could have done that. The signal's really shaky, and, you know, I don't want to do that. So anyway, I am podcasting now. Even though I have sod all to talk about. So, sod all. Do you know that the Brits have much better terms than Americans do? Americans, we kind of tend to just go for the gold. We go for the cussing. We do a lot of F-bombs, and don't get me wrong, I love the F word. You can use that in a million different ways. Like, there is no, it transcends any and all grammatical rules. It's a fantastic word. But, you know, the Brits have such a way of expressing things with just the right amount of uppityness and disdain for why would you, or that, like, you can express disdain for something by simultaneously being condescending and making it less than important, which, you know, in hindsight is, I mean, definitely indicative of a huge amount of privilege and a lot of conceitedness, maybe, self-assurance, self-righteousness, but at the same time, they have some very effective phrases. So, anyway, something that I enjoy about linguistics. Or the Irish, or the Scots, very few people beat either one of those cultures for just absolute sarcasm. The French tend to make things quite complicated, but they also have that very sneering, almost overcomplicated explanation or diction in order to make you feel not only insulted, but stupid to boot, almost as if they're going to just, they're that guy. They're that guy who over-explains. You blind them with science. Like, that's the French. You just blind them with all of the words. I think French is such a wonderful language. I took 4 years of it, and I can hold rudimentary conversations, you know, but it's definitely not as advanced as my Spanish, which I took no classes in and learned by pure immersion. But I love that, you know, in English, it's a potato. In Spanish, it's a papa. And in French, it's a pomme de terre. And a pomme de terre is a apple of the earth. So not only did you define something with a metaphor, like, not only did you use this inordinate amount of words, but then you defined it by comparing it to something completely different that had nothing to do with it. So you used a metaphor in order to create a name for something, which is the height of language and understanding. Anyway, all of that nonsense. I was watching a podcast. I was watching The Fat Squirrel, who is Amy Beth, who is fantastic. And she was discussing a podcast she had recently listened to with regarding abolition of the police force and, like, the differences between abolitionists and people who believe in defunding and reform. And I thought it was a really interesting concept because so many of us, you know, as she says, so many of us have grown up with police. You know, that's been a thing we've almost always had in our country. You know, and then being, you know, of military background, you know, somebody in a uniformed service, I think it's just more familiar to me than what it is to a lot of people. But the idea of brotherhood and never snitching and putting some of the corruption under the rug, like, none of that is a foreign concept either, I guess. I will link it down below. There is a post that I shared earlier on my Instagram, and it is called Confessions of a Bastard Cop, maybe is what it's called. I'll link it. But it's a gentleman detailing his years in the police force and what that was like. Not only how they were trained, but the language that was used, a very us versus them. You know, the general populace doesn't understand your job. They don't care about your job. You know, the only ones that are going to keep you safe and bring you home are your comrades at your back. You know, and it kind of addressed, you know, how it was that 3 other officers could stand around this man who choked the life out of somebody on a grocery store floor, and how they could do nothing. And it addressed some of the concept of why the police force, why it's so hard to prosecute cops, and how the police force trains you, and how they abuse their power, how they use their power to basically entertain themselves, or to better themselves or make themselves look good or whatever. And there's so much that he said in there that reminded me of military days, you know, not in the purposely go out and make somebody's life miserable or abuse my power necessarily, but in the camaraderie that you build and the kind of unspoken rules of the military brotherhood, you know, things that there's a famous, you know, we have a kind of a famous saying that basically, like, people who wear uniform, like military, there are no strangers. There's your brother and the guy, you know, there's your brother and the one who's not here yet. Like, you know, we meet each other and there's so much shared background that you get to skip that let me get to know you process, and you just are. Which is really convenient if it's somebody that you're going to be sent down range to war with. You make sure that the guy isn't going to shoot you in the back, you know, gives you a bit of a confidence level that he's going to be there to protect you, or she's going to be there to have your back, or whatever. But at the same time, you know, it also kind of teaches you to see everybody in a monolithic sense as opposed to separate moving parts. Anyway, so Amy Beth had listened to this podcast discussing defunding of the police force and stuff like that, and after I listen to it, I might link it below in the show notes, just in the description box, so it won't be there in the next few hours. I still have to listen to it. I want to finish her podcast and hear her thoughts on it, and then I want to listen to it. But I do recommend that you go over and watch Amy Beth's most recent podcast. She discusses it a little bit, but she also says that if you're going to make any kind of commentary about police reform or abolition, that you need to please listen to the podcast she's referencing first, so that there's a basic understanding of what the concept is. Because right now there's a whole lot of like, defund the police and abolish the police, and those are not the same thing. Abolishing the police force is getting rid of the police force in the capacity that it stands right now. And same with defunding the police force, okay? So both of those things, they make it sound like, oh, you're going to wipe them off and we're just going to have this gaping hole in our society and it'll be anarchy. How are we going to do that? And that's not what either one of those concepts means. Both of those concepts discuss removing all of this funding and all of this weaponizing of this police force and allocating it into different areas in the community and building this community into a different way. So, for instance, why is it that we have an armed officer coming out to chase down stray dogs? Why is an armed officer coming out to discuss my neighbor stole my son's bike? Why is it that there's a gentleman in my neighborhood who just looks lost and like he might need a little bit of help, or there's a man sleeping on a bench in the park? Why is this the same guy? Why is the guy responding to that the same dude who's dealing with armed bank robbers, or the serial killer down the road? Or, you know, why is the guy who was responding to armed robbery at the 7-Eleven the same one you're sending to the young woman who was raped and lodging a complaint? Like, is that officer really trained for that? Like, many officers will tell you, you know, I'm a dog catcher, a social worker, a marriage counselor, a therapist, a mediator, a child educator, you know, and then you end up with those times where you have police officers responding to people who are victims of mental health, or who are disabled, or autistic. You see that in the news all the time. So anyway, basically the idea of defunding or abolishing the police force is basically to reallocate funds, and instead of having this one squad do all of these different things and wear all of these different hats, which you wouldn't expect your doctors to do, it would be to actually find people to fill those positions so that you could solve things in your own communities at the most basic levels. So instead of calling the cops over your neighbor who won't turn his music off at 2 a.m, you can just like call your HOA guy or whatever, whoever's, you know, your neighborhood community watch, and he can walk over and have the discussion for you. So that's a really simplistic view on it. Anyway, I would really encourage you guys to go listen to that podcast, and I wonder how. I don't know. I'm interested to listen to it. I'm really interested to listen to it. I want to see what it says, because I think there's a lot of merit to that idea, to not having the police be everything that they are right now. I don't know that our society would ever survive without a police tasking of some sort, like an armed response of some sort, especially because we allow weapons in this country. But I do think that there's a lot of times that we're calling the cops where the cops weren't the ones that needed to be called, you know. So anyway, Let's get into some knitting, why don't we? There's been a lot going on this week. It's been a very heavy week. Protesters still going, which is good. You know, if you're not protesting, I hope that you're donating. I hope that you're sharing. I hope that you're providing medicine or food or water, or hey, just a thumbs up to the protesters. You know, change is starting to happen. Breonna's law was passed today, or was approved today, and yeah, real change is being made, and the whole world is stepping up, and it feels so much different than any of the previous protests that we have had, not only in this country, but regarding the horrific death of a Black person while in police custody or caused by the police. So we are nowhere near done, and it is not the end of the problems. Indigenous genocide is still happening, and nobody cares. You know, so we are still very, very much working. If you have a minute, I would also encourage you to write your congressman or your senator. You know, definitely put pressure on them for legislation regarding the police, and for legislation for people who are in detention during COVID. There have been a lot of reports about immigration detention centers who are basically being so over-sterilized that it's causing people to like have nosebleeds, and some of the people in custody have had COVID a couple of times. You know, it's being passed back around. It's just, in general, just not being handled in any form of a humane manner. One would think, right? But apparently we have to keep on our legislators to give a shit about the people around them. One thing I really wish that America in particular, not just America, the world, I wish that we would stop with the us versus them. I really wish we would stop with the us versus them narrative. I was speaking with a friend today who was talking to me about how she was a child when Dr. King was marching in Selma, and she was a child when segregation in schools first happened. And she said, you know, people talk about this like it was 120 years ago, and it was not. It was not. Interracial marriage was illegal until 1967. My mother was born in 62 and my dad was born in 64. Both of them were children, and it was still illegal to mix with the coloreds. No, I mean, that's just absolutely horrific, you know, to think that it was that recent, you know. And I mean, we all know it's been that recent, but nobody stops to think like, oh, I don't know, Led Zeppelin came out with Stairway to Heaven in 69, and that was 2 years later. I think it was like 70 something. I don't really, I'll put it here. But you know my point, you know, like these things were still viciously being fought. You know, the Vietnam War was not that long ago, you guys. You know, we just said goodbye to our last surviving veteran of World War I, I think. World War II, we still got people around. Anyway, time is funny. Time in the education in the time of pandemic, right? Things you learn. Real quick, please educate yourself. There's so much out there. Whatever device you are watching me on holds the fount of human knowledge, the entirety of human experience and knowledge and opinion and whatever is literally in front of you. Please use it. Don't ask your friends. Don't ask me. Don't go into the DMs of a Black person and ask them to explain it. Just, hey, Google, Bing. Who else has a search engine? I don't know. Whoever else has a search engine. Maybe not Bing. Bing seems to be a little unreliable. No offense. But, you know, you see my point. You know, the libraries and Overdrive and Amazon and Kindle and... There are resources. They are not hard to find. I will even do the work for you and link some below. On that note, my favorite beginning resource for anybody who is just starting out or who maybe is still on the, oh, it can't be that bad fence. My favorite resource is So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. It is, in my opinion, the best starting off point you could get. It has multiple chapters. Each of them are clearly discussed. Each of them is clearly marked. They start out with, you know, what is a microaggression? what is racism and how do I know that I'm guilty of it? What can I do? The model minority myth, she discusses terms, tells you what they mean, how they apply to you, and what you can do about them. And it is absolutely a comprehensive beginner step, and I love it. The audiobook is narrated by Bonnie Turpin, who is wonderful. Oh, wonderful. That was one of the most educational books I think I've ever read in my life. So I really recommend that one. And then Layla Saad has a book out called Me and White Supremacy, and it started out as a 30-day workbook to point out your biases so that you would see exactly what people were talking about and see, again, how they affected you. I have decreased too many times on my guesses, so hold on. There is also a book regarding racism. It's a little pocket book that was self-published by a biracial gentleman. I cannot think of his name right now. I found it randomly on my IGTV feed. If I can find it, I will link that below too. And I'll try to put it on the screen here if it'll let you know if I found it or not. Which is, like I said, really great for discussing it with your children so that they can understand it and to lead discussions with it. Racism is not something that you come up with naturally, you guys. It is taught. And that conversation of that thing that you do as parents where you shy away from an ugly conversation because you don't want to ruin their innocence or you don't want to have to tell them what the world really is, you're making it worse. And mind your language, because this us versus them narrative is insidious. You don't have to overtly be hateful. You just have to believe that you and them are different. And while you are different, you are, and they have experiences that you will never have. And I realize that it's a fine line to discuss and to embrace the fact that they have experiences that you will never have and that do make up part of them. Those experiences and that color do not define them. And that is a line to walk. And if you find that you're having trouble walking that line, as every one of us are, continue to educate yourself. It will get better. You can do this. I can do this. We're all going to fuck up and we're all going to be here together and we're all going to do it together and we're all going to be here for each other. Okay, so don't give up. We can do this. And that is all I will say about that and my soapbox. So, I have to undo this one. And I didn't want to tink out the whole row and come back and do it. So I'm just going to take a second. Take a breath. Y'all take a breath too. Get a drink. And let's come back and let's start with knitting because it's exhausting. It's a lot of work. It's never ending. And we want to make sure that we give as much of ourselves to it every second of every day that we can and still fight a good fight. So you're not going to be any help to anybody if you burn yourself out. Either it's like the gym. Put in the best effort that you can. Not every workout will be perfect, but even if you're not having a perfect workout or even if you choose to make your workout shorter, the quality of workout that you're getting is going to be more important than whether or not you were there for an hour a day, right? And there's so much information. So, you're going to overload. You're going to be overwhelmed. Take it slow. Sit on something for a couple of days. There's no end of just keep writing down on the list the things that you want to check out or that you have been recommended or that you think are going to work and, go through that list at your own pace. We'll all get to the end of it. Okay, knitting wise, I only have one thing on the needles that I'm actively working on. This is the first time I've picked up the socks since last week. Oh, I'm all stuck on my pins. Let me shift that. It does live in my fringe field bag. This is the tartan wax canvas. I've had this for a few years. Y'all know all about this. I did buy a new pin for it that I don't remember if I showed this last week or not, so I'll do it again anyway. I got this from an Etsy shop that I will put on the screen right now. It is Be Someone. This is the Houston skyline. Be Someone is tagged. It was done by a graffiti artist years ago. Was tagged on the bridge that leads from I-45 south into downtown. As you come in, you see the skyline rise up, and then on the bridge, on the train bridge, it says "Be Someone." And it's been kind of like an unofficial landmark for years here in Houston. So it was kind of a tagline for us, I guess. So yeah, the only thing I'm working on is my Defense Against the Dark Art socks. This is by Nomadic Yarns, who, from what I'm understanding, is either going to rename or retire all of her Harry Potter colorways due to J.K. Rowling's inability to be a decent person. Which is really sad. Ashley has a ton of Harry Potter colorways. I think she has over 50. And they are phenomenal. I mean, as most of you know who've watched my podcast, you know, I would say that probably my last 4 pairs of socks, that my last 4 favorite pairs of socks have been Nomadic Yarns. They have been Harry Potter references, which I've really enjoyed. You know, my son wanted a Harry Potter birthday party this year, and we had a conversation about what Rowling said, and now he doesn't want to do that anymore. He wants to have another Transformers party. He says that it's, you know, he wants to be able to have fun with it, but he doesn't want to make anybody feel bad by supporting something that is ugly. So he has chosen that he does not want that anymore, so we will probably be switching. So this is Defense Against the Dark Arts. My favorite part is this really pretty blush pink, but it is this is about a full repeat. So it's 2 different kinds of purple. You have this eggplant, and then a grape, and then you have kind of a purpley gray almost, and then a toffee color and this blush pink. And I'm really enjoying it. It's her base is wonderful. It's a really nice yarn. So I am working on that right now. Yeah, that's about it. So this is the first time I've picked up anything else. I have one project on the needles that I think I'm about ready to separate for sleeves. You guys haven't seen this. I started it after the last podcast, and I think I'm done with the body. I think I need to separate for sleeves and do the upper portion, do the torso portion, the yoke, I guess. Is it still a yoke when you don't knit it top down? I don't know the terminology for that. Is it a yoke when it's not in the round as a raglan? What if this is set in sleeve? Is it still a yoke? Questions that I should ask Ellie of Skandir, because she doesn't do any one of those constructions. So it's living in my Luna Pie Designs coffee bag, because I needed a sweater bag that I could travel with, and my porter bin is taken up with my blanket, so I just took this one. So this is, living on here is my Sweet Sparrow Yarns Pinecone Progress Keeper. I got it in a club colorway. This is the body of the Lace Hem Tee by Carina Spencer, and it's all rolled up. I stretched it out a little bit ago. I haven't blocked it, but I stretched it out a little bit ago to kind of find out where I would be. This is somehow going to become 10 inches. Like, it actually does work. It's a pretty cool thing. All the lace is bunched up. So it does have a lace hem and 2 different colors. It's very simple lace. It's very intuitive. The yarn is Wonderland yarns in the Cheshire Cat base, I believe. It's called Cabbages and Kings. It's this beautiful, beautiful summery green color. And then this fabulousness right here is LolaBean Yarn Company in the Bean Sprout, which is an 80/20 merino nylon. This is her Georgia Peach colorway. And it's absolutely gorgeous. It has just the most beautiful tonality to it. So yeah, this is one of my absolute favorite colors. And this will be like the 3rd top I've made out of this color. This color family, but the first time I've used LolaBean yarn, and I can't say enough good things about it. If you have a stockist or a vendor who handles LolaBean, Adela dyes wonderful yarn. If you don't follow her on Instagram, you totally should. She has, her family is fantastic. Her husband is hysterical, and she has a lot to say. She is very educational. She's very free with her knowledge, as long as you are polite in asking. Don't ask her about the state of the world. But if you would like to know something about how she dyes, or what she does, or the new warming cabinet she just bought, She's usually really open to sharing new techniques because she, as she is fond of saying, one day she will not be dying and who will come next. So she's trying to make it easier for the next generation to come in because it was relatively difficult for her whenever she started. So anyway, it will ripple. The green will ripple whenever I block it. I'll just pin it out so that it'll look really pretty. So I'm about to the point where where I've separated, where I will separate for the front and the back. I'm probably going to do about another 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch or something. But yeah, that's that, you guys. My son went down to the mailbox for me. Yeah, that's about it. So, I told you I was very, very light on the knitting content today. There is a lot of chatting done here. I hope that you find at least some of it to be educational. I was watching the Grocery Girls this morning. Apparently Friday is the day for podcasts in the knitting community. It used to be Wednesday and Thursday, but apparently Friday is the new normal because of COVID. But I was watching the Grocery Girls today, and they were discussing losing followers and how they were kind of not surprised that they were losing them by any stretch of the imagination, but surprised that there were still so many who hadn't left yet, and they're very open when it comes to being to not being racist. They'll admit that their anti-racism stance could have been stronger, and they are committed to making it stronger now. But they've never been racist. They've never been for hate. They have always been very, very supportive of the LGBTQ community. Jody's daughter has apparently presented as non-binary. I don't know. Yeah, Jody's daughter has presented as non-binary. They also have a yarn business called To The Max, MACKS. You should check out their colorways. They are absolutely beautiful. Anyway, so they were commenting today how funny it was to still have all these people who would announce that they were unfollowing and then leave in the loudest manner possible. Why are you still here? Like, nothing's changed. Like, we've been having this conversation for almost 2 years now, 18 months ago, the knitting world blew up over racist commentary and derogatory comments and, a Ravelry banned Trump supporting, conversations supporting Trump and all of that, as hate speech or whatever. And this is not a new conversation. So Jody was commenting that she just found it so weird that you stayed for all of that, but the moment that I said Black Lives Matter, you felt it necessary to storm out and slam the door on the way. So anyway, yeah, I just thought that was kind of, I don't know, it kind of made me, I think that whenever you have a platform, you try your level best to put out who you are. But ultimately what you guys see, let's say here, what you see of me is 1/1,000,000th of a semi-curated vision of who I am. Now, it is not curated in the fact that I want to show you this good side, but it is curated in the fact that normally whenever I get on here, I usually have something to say. Whereas if you know me in real life, if there's a silence between us, there can just be silence. It's fine. Like, I don't feel it necessary to fill. That seems to me to be like the greatest indicator of who your true friends are, is if you can sit in silence with them and nobody is offended and nobody is awkward and nobody feels weird about it. But, we try really hard, being podcasters, to put out the truest sense of who we are. But I think sometimes, you forget that it really is just a sliver, and that so many people, especially when you have a following as big as the Grocery Girls, and you shine lights on smaller businesses as much as Jody and Tracy do, or you're as involved with the community as Jody and Tracy have been over the last 5 years, 4 years, whatever it is, that people in relationships know this. You kind of lie to yourself about who that person is to make them fit the vision of who you want them to be. So there's usually a very big discrepancy between your true self and how somebody perceives you. And some of that is just because they show up at the wrong time or the right time, or, you know, they willfully and actively redefine your actions or words or whatnot to suit their narrative. You know what I mean? So anyway, I would urge all of you viewers to take what you see on screen with a grain of salt. And I would urge you content creators to maybe curate less, you know, especially during this time. Maybe spend some time with your camera as if it were your significant other, your most trusted person sitting across from you. Yeah, you're gonna lose followers in the beginning. You're not gonna be everybody's cup of tea, but you never were anyway. And curating your entire podcast, I think the formality of it sometimes doesn't allow true colors to shine through. Oh, speaking of true colors, you guys, I'm a terrible podcaster. I'm so sorry. So if you stuck with me through all of this, through everything I have spoken of, I have a prize for you. I was weeding out the people that, you know, I don't want the wrong people to win this. So I wanted to announce the second round of the sweater raffle. So I know that the first round that I did with Hohi Locatelli and Julie of Sweet Sparrow Yarns, I know that you guys didn't find out about it until like 2 days before I closed it. And I am so sorry for that. That was just poor timing on my part. And to be absolutely blunt, we raised quite a bit of money really fast. I think I hit $400 in the first 2 days or something. It was insane. So if you were a participant in that first raffle, thank you so much. You guys raised $900. That was donated to the Know Your Rights camp founded by Colin Kaepernick, and it is a youth camp that travels around the nation to educate youth on policing, their rights as citizens, and the law that they, you know, to help educate youth about the unique relationship they have to the police in a lot of urban areas. So it's a wonderful, wonderful camp. It is a very, very educational tool. I personally really supported it, and I thought that was a great place for the money to go. I had originally intended for the money to go to the Black Visions Collective, which is a Black, queer, and trans-led organization that works to dismantle systems of racism. But they had posted up on their Facebook that they had kind of been inundated with funds, and thank you so very much, but could you maybe spread the love a little bit? So I chose Know Your Rights Camp. Reclaim the Block, Black Visions Collective, and there was one more. I don't remember who it is off the top of my head. Had all asked that funds be allocated elsewhere. I had originally planned to give it to Campaign Zero, but I was reading some of their literature, and they have a hashtag, says 8 Can't Wait, and basically it's for police reform. It's for reteaching police about, it's about changing the types of force that they're allowed to use. And I just personally am not sure that reforming the police station again or reteaching them things is going to really fix the problem. I think that police officers in America, police officers go through like 1,000 hours of coursework or something, and then they're given a badge and a gun. And they're not lawyers. Most of them aren't required to have a criminal justice degree. You know, other countries, you're required to have a 3-year degree, like in a specific field, before you're ever even allowed to take the proficiency test to be an officer. And I feel like the lack of education and the uniformed union brotherhood mentality has led for a really toxic environment to a system that was originally put in place to return escaped slaves to their white masters. So I just don't feel like reform is really the way to go in that respect. As far as just reteaching cops how to be decent people, I don't feel like there's, I don't know. At the base of it, I feel like you're asking, even if they're good cops, even if they're good people who are there to try to make the most difference that they possibly can, you're asking too much of a single person. You're asking them to wear too many hats. It's not possible. You know, we don't expect the fire department to do that. I think that the biggest deviation the fire department has from putting out fires is to assist in medical, emergency medical care. Maybe help get your cat out of a tree if you live in a tiny little town and they don't have anything else to do. And apparently some police departments field like suicide calls. I don't know. But I feel like EMTs aren't required to do anything but administer first responder medication, like medical aid. And I just feel like the police have so many different avenues that they're supposed to walk that it just isn't realistic. Anyway, all of that to say that I didn't give it to a campaign 0. That's why. The second raffle, and it is June, and in honor of Pride, I did choose to go with True Colors United. True Colors United is a nonprofit organization that deals with homelessness in the youth community, specifically as it applies to LGBTQ youth. Youth who fall on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum are more than twice as likely to end up homeless as their non-LGBTQ identifying counterparts. So that means that through identity crises and issues at home and acceptance and mental health issues, all of these things are being foisted upon these youngsters who are then finding themselves without a place to go. And that's a unique challenge, So True Colors United is dedicated to accepting that challenge and to educating and doing their level best to bring that number down and to get kids off the streets, which is absolutely something that I think needs to be done. I think that as long as you have parents who are old-fashioned enough or who are selfish enough to disown their children for their choice of identity or who they're going to love, I think that this is something that you're going to have. And as it is a whole lot harder to teach an old dog new tricks, apparently, instead of trying to fix the person who is causing the pain and definitely needs help and needs therapy, sometimes you have to help the victim first. So getting the kids off the streets and getting them into a safe space and on their way to living a full life as their true selves is definitely the first form of treatment. That's definitely the first aid. So that is what True Colors United does. And so all proceeds of the second sweater raffle will go to benefit this organization. I am featuring Jamie Hoffman of Knitosophy. Longtime followers will know that I knit her swallowtail sweater. That's the butterfly sweater here. I knit that for Candace of Farmer's Daughter Fibers last year. It was a wonderful knit, absolutely pleasant. Jamie is a doll. That woman is just so sweet. Anyway, so I'm featuring her as a designer. The winner will receive their choice of her garment patterns. She does have a DK version of her, what does she call it? It's a V-neck that you can wear backward. It's really cute. It's a reversible V-neck tee. She has a DK version coming out here shortly. And then she does have another colorwork sweater called the Rattlesnake, which will be released in August. And she is also adding that. So if you were the winner and you chose that you really wanted the Rattlesnake pattern and you were willing to wait, you are welcome to get that pattern. Jamie is also going to be adding a donation on top of ours. And her donation will be the equivalent of a sample. So what that means is if you choose to get the swallowtail sweater and it was 1,600 yards of fingering weight yarn, she will match 20 cents for every yard. So that would end up being roughly a $350 donation on top of whatever it is that we raise, which is absolutely fantastic and so generous. Jamie, you're a doll. To work with her, Kemper of Junk Yarn, which she's a magician on. She creates magic on string. She has very generously donated a sweaters quantity of the winner's choice for this project. So you'll pick out your sweater, and then you'll pick out your colors. You'll decide on a base and a color palette, and then you will discuss it with the knitter, which will not be me. The knitter this round is going to be Alicia. Her Instagram handle is ATXAlice, and she has, again, so generously offered to donate her time and skills to create a unique piece just for you, just for the winner. So I really hope that you guys will participate. I really hope, please spread the word. Please spread the word. That way, you know, the more money that we raise, the more money we can contribute to doing good in our own communities. Please be aware that nobody involved with this receives anything. Nobody receives anything. I create a spreadsheet and I put up a post on Instagram and I shared it. Jamie will donate a pattern and then she will donate her own money. And Kemper will donate some yarn and her hard work like that. And Alicia will give up her time and her skill. Nobody is receiving anything. I am actually doing very minimal. I'm not highlighting patterns that Jamie has designed. I'm not highlighting shop updates for Kemper. I'm not posting yarn of what she makes. I'm not giving any advertising whatsoever to the people who are involved in this. All of this is being done to donate time as a charity and to be able to, you know, fuel some creativity in our community. I don't sell anything, you guys. I don't sell anything and I don't make anything. I'm just a knitter like you. I have enough sweater experience that I feel completely comfortable with knitting. I'm all tangled up on my pins again. I feel completely comfortable with knitting somebody's choice of sweater, and if I can raise money by offering up my time, I will absolutely do that gladly. So please don't feel like these people are getting a whole lot of exposure. They're really not. They're really not. If anything, they are lending their platforms to me. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but on Instagram, I might now, after the first sweater raffle, have 500 followers. I think I had 382 before I started the first raffle. And so many people from Hohi Locatelli to the grocery girls to just so many people were so kind. Ellie of Skandir. I reached out to quite a few people who were so kind to signal boost me and to allow me use of their platforms. So if one of you is watching and you did that for me, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So I don't have any followers, you guys, so nobody's getting any advertising from me. We're all just donating time and money and skill. So I hope you'll participate with us. I do want to address one other thing. I've been asked why I'm not highlighting dyers and designers of color, or black dyers and designers, especially with what's going on in the world, and I want to discuss that real quick before I go. I did not highlight a dyer or designer that was black in the last raffle because every black person that has a platform in this community basically had a sign on their door that said, after George Floyd was murdered, that said, "I'm tired, go away." And I didn't want to infringe upon that grief. I didn't want to infringe upon that pain. I also personally feel like it's really craptastic to ask a black designer or a black dyer to give of themselves in order to raise money to benefit a system that is trying to dismantle the oppression that is causing them pain. Does that make sense? I don't want them to fund their own therapy. I don't want them to fund their own... You know what's causing pain in the BIPOC community? White people. We're causing pain in the black community. So I felt that it was fair that white people put up the effort in order to fund relief. That's the long and the short of it. That's as blunt as I can put. The systems that are oppressing these people were built by white people. White people built this country on their backs and have given them absolutely nothing but broken promises and shattered dreams in return. So I felt that it was only right for me as a white knitter to approach a white designer and a white dyer and request that help. Now, my first raffle was not a white designer. My first raffle was Hohi Locatelli, who is absolutely an advocate for anti-racism and anti-hate, and who has done such good work, and who was kind enough to volunteer when she found out what I was doing. So I had originally asked her if she would just signal boost me, and she came back and said that she wanted to participate. So she said that she wanted to, she knew it was going to benefit American organizations, and she still wanted to participate, which I thought was fantastic. My knitter this time is a Black woman, and she volunteered. She came to me and volunteered. So these are things that, you know, the time has been offered, the time has been honored, the time has been respected and absolutely appreciated. So much appreciated that that voice has been given. But the people that I have approached in these last 2 raffles have been white women, just straight up. So yeah, that's why. I would very much like at a later date to be able to highlight dyers and designers of color. But I just felt that right now, with everything that's going on in this world, in this nation, with everything that's going on in my country, and the amount of hatred that's being given out to anybody who's not white, I just felt like maybe that wasn't where I should go for the first couple of raffles. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to go because I'm apparently super long-winded today. I think this might be the longest episode I've ever had, and all I've done is talk. Happy Friday. Happy weekend. Be kind. Read. Let me know what you find that is really great. That if you find resources that you think the rest of us could benefit from, please drop it in the comments below. I would love to be able to read some new stuff. There is a laundry list of any resources. There is no shortage of resources. Please feel free to dive into that list. And if you need recommendations, please feel free to DM me, and I will shoot you over what I have found to be useful or where I have gotten my resources from. Okay? Thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.